The Writer's Dossier Podcast is a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network.
No writers were harmed in the production of this podcast.
I'm Rob Hart, and this is my Writer's Dossier.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Writer's Dossier. Tonight I'm joined by my steady co-host, Mindy Carlson. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for being here. It's always good to see you with your English wave. Hello.
Hello.
Tonight's episode is another amazing guest, Rob Hart. This guy, I'm telling you, as I said in the intro just a few seconds ago, Rob is doing some amazing things, and I've said for a long time now that he is in a league by himself, and we're going to put him up against the Dossier Grill and see what we can get out of him. So Rob Hart, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. You are too kind, and the check is in the mail.
Check is in the mail. I see some editing services in my future. Here, I'm going to send you about 10 pages you can take a quick read at, which, hey, we're going to get into your editing stuff here in a minute. But one of the things I love about you is that you not only have opinions, you express them, and you do it publicly through your Substack, which everybody needs to subscribe to and actually take the time to click, open, and read. Now, not everything you've said and done in your publishing career has been very popular. What have you got for people who don't like your direct approach?
I mean, look, like I don't really care if someone doesn't like what I have to say because I'm always right. So that's their problem. No, that's not true. Look, I feel like I'm in a very privileged position. You know, like I'm a white dude. I got all my hair. I'm okay. Like no one's coming for me. Like this world was built for me. So if I'm gonna use any opportunity I can to say things like, you know, I guess like the biggest Substack I ever wrote was the one about VoucherCon, where, you know, some dork wanted to take out the inclusivity language in the terms of, you know, the terms of membership or whatever. And, you know, stuff like that bugs me because it's like, you know, it's dumb. It's just dumb. It's like you're trying to all lives matter this. And we know how that's just, you know, dog whistle racism. So, I mean, I honestly, I don't lose anything. So what's the point in being quiet about it?
Did you get any kickback, any repercussions that you're still trying to overcome? Or did you just, bam, hey, this is how I feel, deal with it?
Yeah, I've every now and again, I've gotten a letter from someone who's like, you know, been kind of a jerk or been kind of upset. And my general operating procedure is to take that letter, correct all the syntax and grammar, and just send it back to them. There's really not much more that needs to be said at that point. It's like, you know, we're good.
I, for one, really appreciate the way that you try and dispel the mythology in writing, where it's like you hit it big and you remain big, or like there's the magic of the debut where like you come right out of the gate fighting, or else it's not worth continuing to write. And I really appreciate that as sort of somebody on the newer end of writing, that, or to hear from somebody who's been around the block a few times, that there's a lot of like lies that we tell ourselves and lies that we say in writing that, well, you know, we need to tell the truth about.
Yeah, you know, and I've actually, this is something I've been talking about a lot lately. I was in a panel this past weekend where I talked about it, which is writers need to talk about their failures as much as they talk about their successes, because, you know, we go on social media and we share like the publisher's marketplace announcements and the deal memos and like the variety articles because we got optioned, and those are great and those are awesome. But the reality is that for every success I've had 5, 10, 15 failures. Like we could sit here for the next hour and I can tell you about all the projects that I wished had gone forward that, you know, didn't. And it's so important to talk about how this is a game of inches. You know, there's no final boss. There's no final battle. You keep on doing the work and you have to be persistent. And I think that because people don't see that, they don't see all that, you know, that loss. They think like, oh, well, I'm the only one who's having a hard time. And that sucks. And then I think when it comes to, you know, I'm very much in favor of people talking about advances, because I think it's the same way that like in corporate America, we're encouraged to not talk about salaries because it's uncouth. It's not uncouth. It's because they don't want us to know what we're making. They don't want us to know that the guy, you know, sitting in the office next to us is making $20,000, more a year, because then we might want 20,000 more a year. So, being able to arm ourselves with knowledge is just a good thing. So, I'll keep doing it until someone gets angry at me, which has not happened yet.
Yeah, I mean, another part of the myth of writing is that everything comes out perfect when you write
God,
it,
no.
and that there's no editing, but you do a lot of developmental editing for people, right?
Yeah. And I love it. I love working with writers. It is so much fun to take a story that you're kind of seeing in the transitional stage where it's like almost there and not there yet. And a good editor, and I feel like I'm pretty good at it. The people I've worked with can say whether or not I'm good, but the good editors that I've worked with, the thing that they are best at is taking a story, seeing its potential, and helping me get there as a writer, not doing it for me. That's not the job I want to do for anyone. I don't want to tell anyone how to write their story, but I want to give them the tools they need to kind of figure out the best way to make it the best possible version of itself.
Well, I don't think you've made a lot of mistakes in your writing, and you and I have had conversations offline about, I love The Warehouse, love the Assassins series that you have going on right now. Let me ask, now, people probably know you from your hit books, like The Paradox Hotel, the Ash McKenna series, and like I said, The Warehouse. Now, a few years ago, you started a new series, kicked it off with Assassins Anonymous, and you're following up with the MEDUSA Protocol, which you were kind enough to send me a copy. And it's a book that Mark Greaney said was impossible to put down. Tell us a little bit about what Mark is up to in the MEDUSA Protocol, and it's an awesome title, by the way. And Mark being the character, Mark, not Mark Greaney, but tell us about Mark and what he's up to now.
Yeah, sure. So the thing that I wanted to do with this book is I kind of moved the lens a little bit. So the book is still following Mark, who is, the main character of the first book, but now he's sharing narrative duties with Astrid, who is another character from the first book and eventually becomes another member of the Assassins Anonymous home group. And that was the thing that was so fun about this, is that, I've got a recovery program of killers. They're all interesting. They all have their own stories. They all have their own traumas. So there's an opportunity to unpack them. And so it was like, well, Mark, recovery is a process. Like no one's ever, there's no point that like, you're fixed, everything's fine. But Mark does have an ego death in the first book that's really important to his journey. So he's in a much better place in the second book. So for the second book, it was like, well, now I want to find out someone else's story. So now we go back through Astrid's past and we see what brought her to being a professional killer and the kind of things that she's dealing with. And the book basically revolves around her getting kidnapped and thrown into a black site prison, and she has no idea why. She's trying to get out. The others are trying to save her, and it's a whole big mess.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it is. Trust me. Thank you, Rob, for sending me that. Mindy, you're going to love it. So you've written 2 books now about the world's deadliest killer. What was the research like for someone who's an assassin? Is there like a LinkedIn page or a Substack you can follow to make the proper connections?
It's interesting. I mean, like right off the bat, like I've always loved assassin movies. I love that weird little gray area of, where we kind of decide like, killing is wrong, but it's okay if this person does it. It's okay if John Wick kills like 100 people. Like it's fine because they're all bad guys. So that was part of it. There was, it's escaping me now because it's going back a while, but there was a really interesting book written by this guy who he was a hitman, and he was I think he was in the military. I think he was in Nam, and then he was a biker, and then he was killing people for money, and it was like a memoir. And it was really, really interesting, just sort of like his perspective and why he was doing it and how it affected him. And, these stories do exist. There are people who not people who are doing it on this like weird Looney Tunes fantasy level that I'm writing about of like clandestine government organizations. There are, but like we don't have access to those people, but it was interesting because to my mind, I feel like the research on this book wasn't as great as some of my other works. Cause like Warehouse, I've got like 100 pages of like notes and reference material. For Paradox Hotel, it's a time travel book. Like I read like 3 separate books on time travel theory and quantum mechanics. So that felt like such a huge lift. Whereas this kind of felt like it was definitely Assassins Anonymous was a book where I kind of just set off and started working on it. And it was like catch as catch can with the research, where it was like, oh, I would like to, he's got to wear a bulletproof vest now. Let me pop into Google and figure out like what bulletproof vest, like how those work in terms of like ballistic levels and stuff like that. So definitely much more run and gun compared to previous work.
So are you outlining as you're researching, or or do you outline at all?
I outline reasonably heavy before I get started. Like I always have a really strong sense of the shape of the story. It will change and morph as I go. I did a little bit less outlining with Assassins because it was less world building. It was less, again, like when you're doing a time travel book, like you really got to bang that thing out because it's like, it's hard. I keep saying it's like eating White Castle. It sounds like a great idea until you do it, and then you wonder why you did it in the first place.
There's the clip we're gonna send out to promote this episode. Great.
But with Assassins, it was like I kind of honestly the biggest outlining I had to do with Assassins was more of Mark's personal journey, and again that ego death, because that's what I was going for, which is, you know, in the first book he's quote unquote sober, he hasn't killed anyone, but he still has this reputation as like the world's deadliest killer. And he keeps on falling back into that persona because it's still a powerful thing. And he finally realizes that, like, I'm not sober. I may not be killing people, but I'm still trading on my reputation. I'm still making people believe that I might kill them. And so that's not in step with who and what I want to be as a person. You know, figuring that out was honestly more important than figuring out like where he's going to go to what location. And that book actually, in the original draft, the ending was I always need to have a clear sense of the ending, like what that kind of moment of catharsis is going to look like and what that big action beat at the end is going to look like. But this one changed quite a bit from what I first wrote. The first version of it kind of, it kind of sucked. I was rushing through it and just trying to get it done. And then I sat down and I was like, okay, you know, because editing is really just taking out all the words and replacing them with good ones. So I just had to go and do that.
Sounds super easy. What was the anonymity behind calling Mark and not identifying him by any other name?
You know, there was it's weird. It's like I'm really weird about names because, like, to me a book is like a symphony, and a name is like a note in that symphony. And if the name is wrong, then the note's wrong, then it sounds off. And sometimes I will sit there and just like I go to baby naming websites a lot. And I will just sit there and read through names until I hear the one that works for a character. And as soon as I hear it, it hits my ear right. I'll be like, that's the one. And I don't know, for some reason, you know, Mark just came to me right away. And I think part of it is because and no offense to any Marks in the audience, but Mark is it's a very straightforward, it's a simple name. You know, it's strong, but it's direct, but it's not like fancy. And there was a degree that I wanted him to kind of be sort of like an average kind of goofy guy, you know, because the thing that's always funny about like when you watch like watching Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, it's like their job, they're supposed to be assassins. They're supposed to be sneaking around and killing people. Sure, let's have the two most beautiful people in the world do that. The two people who, as soon as they walk in the room, you're going to look at them and say, oh my gosh. You know, so I was trying to build out this idea that Mark was a little bit more of an average looking guy because he's the kind of guy who's going to walk in a room. You're not necessarily going to remember him, but, you know, he's going to have an impact. So, yeah, it was just one of those moments of this sounds right, so let's go with it.
So he doesn't have a Facebook page with him and Astrid going on vacation to the Cayman Islands or anything?
No. He should. Maybe. Well, you know, it's funny. I'm writing the third one right now, and I kept on saying so the first book, you know, they're big, they're fun, they've got a lot of action, but they're about trauma, and they're about like, you know, can we change? Can we grow as people? Can we do terrible things and still make up for them in some way? And you know, the first book is a little heavy. The second book's really heavy because there are some themes in there like it's like sex trafficking that are, you know, they're heavy. And so for the third book, I was like, I'm just going to do a fun one. We're just going to have fun with this. And it's called 3 Hitmen and a Baby. And it's basically like there's one character, Valencia, who has a baby, and Mark and Astrid and Booker, another member of the group, agree to watch the baby who's 2. It's a toddler. So Valencia can go do something because they figure like we're 3 of the deadliest people in the world. We can handle a toddler. And it turns out they cannot. Things go sideways real quick. It ends up, you know, it was a weird pitch. And when I pitched it to my editor, I was like, there's no way she's going to go for it. But she got it. She loved it. So I thought like, yeah, this is going to be the fun one. And then I got halfway through it and realized like I was already like crying as I was writing it because I'm like, shit. Like I really put them through an emotional ringer on this because it ended up being a book about like family. And so, you know, I can't help myself going for those, you know, heavy emotional moments. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. It's coming
Hey,
along.
what about your titles? I love all your titles. They're fantastic. So do you have the title in your head, or does it come at the end, or does your editor say, no? Where's that come from?
Those are all right off the bat.
Okay.
You know, the original title of Assassins Anonymous was the program, because that's what people in AA call it. They call it program. But you know, but then I realized, like, you know, Assassins Anonymous is a much better title, because you see that and you kind of have a sense of what you're going to get. Where if I say to you, hey, I have a book called The Program, you're going to have no idea what that means. You know, the MEDUSA Protocol was originally the 10th Circle, because that's the sort of like nickname of the prison she's being held at. I thought that was kind of cool, but it just kind of wasn't hitting for me. And then when when the MEDUSA Protocol popped into my head, which is part of the story later on, it's something related to the prison, I was like, oh, that's good. That's like a level title right there.
Oh, it's perfect.
But 3 Hitmen and a Baby, just immediately, like, I had that title before I even really had a strong sense of what the book was going to be. I love this title. I'm going to make it work. And that's it. That's the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
King of titles.
It's perfect.
Mindy, do you have anything?
Oh my God. Well, I had something and then it flew out of my head. So.
Okay. What about this? Here's something for you, Mark. See, I bought into the character. I mean, you're Mark. Your experience in publishing.
My husband is Mark.
I almost said earlier, Mark Carlson. What's Mark's last name? Mark Carlson. That has a ring to it. But
Carlson,
no, your experience in publishing, Rob, from running the Mysterious Press to authoring books that have sold internationally, put you in a good position to have a good view over what makes a good book. Tell us about your editing services. Give a plug for that. Despite how busy you are with all of your writing projects, why you keep helping people and showing up at writers' conferences the way you do.
Well, so in terms of plugs, if anyone wants to find me, my website is robwhart.com, and everything kind of springs from there. In terms of the other stuff, you know, there were people who were there for me when they didn't have to be. You know, there were authors who took their time and like sat me down and talked to me. I mean, you remember Beat the Reaper by Josh Brazell? Yeah. Great book.
Fantastic book.
Yeah. And I remember, like, I was a baby writer with a draft of my first novel, and I met him at a reading, and I did the dumb thing. I asked him if he would read it. And looking back now, I realized maybe that was like probably not appropriate, but he said, yeah. And he read it, and he took me out to lunch, and he was like, you got to do a ground run rewrite of the whole thing. It's not working. But here's all the stuff that I think is really good. And it's moments like that. Like there are people who sent the elevator back down. And I think it's important for us to do that. Because again, like, you know, we're in this weird field where we're doing all of this stuff by ourselves, and we don't have a lot of resources. We go to the conferences and we can meet people, and we can talk to people, and we can learn stuff. But the majority of the time or at least the majority of my time, I spend sitting at my kitchen table with like a box of Cheez-Its and a case of Diet Coke, like, you know, sitting in my sweatpants. It's important for us to remember that we're in this together. And I think that as you rise through the ranks, you got to remember the people who were there for you, and you just got to send the elevator back down. It's just the right thing to do.
Well, Rob, that's really good to hear, because, you know, a lot of the listeners are working their way up, and I thanked you in person a few times. We've met a few times and we've talked, and you've always been so kind and gracious with your time, and you were tonight. So thank you for that. Mindy, do you have anything else for Rob?
Oh, no. I mean, I just think the world of Rob, and he's always so kind and generous with his time, and funny and witty, and his books are very inspiring to me. And so I just always love hanging around with Rob.
I think people will discover this the more these books come out, continue to escalate and get more and more popular. And we're going to help you here at the Writer's Dossier. Rob, if anyone hasn't read your dossier right there, definitely go to thewritersdossier.com. Check that out. Go to robwhart.com. Follow you on social media, and definitely subscribe to that Substack, because you lay it all out. Yeah, we love it.
It's worth the read. It's one of the few that I actually open and I read all the way from the top to the bottom.
Excellent. That's good. That's good to know at least one person is.
Yeah, it's me. I'm the person.
It's Mindy. Rob, thanks so much for joining us tonight, folks. Definitely follow up with Rob Hart. Don't miss the MEDUSA Protocol coming soon. We will let everybody know when it's getting close, and we'll drop this episode right around that time. So, Rob, thank you again.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
The Dossier Podcast is a production of The Idea Academy.